NOAA's National Weather Service, Mr. Ken Graham. We'll have the Army Corps of Engineers, Major General Butch Graham. He's their Deputy Commanding General for Civil and Emergency Operations. We've also got U.S. Coast Guard Vice Admiral Peter Gautier. He's the Deputy Commandant for Operations. And we have Health and Human Services Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response, Ms. Dawn O'Connell. And also, as normal, we'll have FEMA's National Spanish Spokesperson, Daniel Yargis. He's going to be providing the FEMA recap of Mrs. Bink's comments today. After updates from Ms. Bink and panel members, you will have about an hour to ask questions pertaining to our response efforts and updates, with one follow-up question if necessary. Please identify yourself as usual with your outlet and your outlet when asking questions. And as always, you can contact the FEMA News Desk at our address FEMA-news-desk@fema.dhs.gov for any questions that may not be answered during today's briefing. As a reminder, we will forward you a link to B-roll that will be more than sufficient to use with any of your reporting. And also, as you can see, we ask that you, we have the ASL interpreter with us today. We ask that you keep him in your camera shots throughout the briefing. We'll begin our news conference here shortly. Thank you.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Ann Bink. I'm the Associate Administrator for the Office of Response and Recovery at FEMA. Thank you for joining us here today and for your continued attention to Florida, as well as South Carolina, and all the people impacted by Hurricane Ian. I also want to thank the dedicated leaders standing up with me here today. The partnerships across the federal family enable our effective response to this disaster and ensures Floridians and South Carolinians get the help they need during these unimaginably difficult times. Our hearts are with Floridians as they endeavor on this long and difficult recovery. And our resolve has never been stronger. Together, we will rebuild from this tragedy, and we will be there until the work is done. This morning, Administrator Criswell traveled to Florida to meet with Governor DeSantis to survey the damage and assess what other assistance may be necessary to support the needs of individuals as they recover. I would also like to echo Administrator Criswell's thanks for Governor DeSantis and Florida's Director of Emergency Management, Kevin Guthrie, for their leadership during this difficult time. Before I provide an informational update and an operational posture here at FEMA, I'd like to kick it over to the National Weather Service for Director Ken Graham's update.
Yeah, appreciate that introduction and that update. Got the latest information. I'm Ken Graham, Director of the Weather Service. First of all, I wanted to say just appreciate the relationship with FEMA, the Coast Guard, the Corps, National Guard. It's just when you in these disasters, we do come together as a family and we get these things done. Unfortunately, we come together too often in recent years. Wanted to give you the latest information on Hurricane Ian. I got the latest just a minute ago. It's just a brand new update. Still 85 miles per hour. It's right on the coast. Really getting pretty close to the coast of South Carolina. It was moving north at 14, now at 15 miles an hour. It's continuing to get a little faster. So its forward movement is getting faster, and that'll continue as we work our way inland. Now, it's just really important to realize it's not just that center point. It really is it's been a large storm for most of its lifetime. Hurricane force winds extend out 70 miles, and the latest I saw, tropical storm force winds about 275 miles out from the center. It's big. So it's not just the folks right around the center. There's quite a few communities that see some of these strong winds. I did want to say there's still remaining river flooding back in Florida, and some of that, it's just important that water doesn't drain very fast. So some of those rivers could stay at flood stage, and several locations actually record flood could be that way for days, even more than a week. So just something to think about with time. But we're not over yet. We're very close to the South Carolina coast. The impacts, winds, the rain bands have already started. There's already been some tornado warnings issued. That's usually on the right front quadrant is where you get 90% of your tornadoes. And so that's as far away as Hatteras, that's far away as communities in North Carolina. So well away from that center. It's really important to think about that. Surge. Water is 90% of your fatalities in these tropical systems comes from water. That's why we spend so much time talking about the dangers of water. Isle of Palms to Little River Inlet, 4 to 7 feet of storm surge. Potential storm surge in some of those communities along the coast, 4 to 7 feet in those areas. And that's just not on the beach. That sneaks up rivers, that sneaks up canals, that could get inland as well. So really listen to those local officials and just be really careful in these situations. Not just there. Look how far it goes away from the center. It's just incredible. It's just an important point that we got to make. Little River Inlet to Cape Fear, 3 to 5 feet of storm surge potential. Cape Fear to Duck, North Carolina, 2 to 4 feet. And when I say those numbers, that's inundation. That's above ground. That's water up your pant leg. And I say it almost every one of these media events. I'm 6'5", 6'6", so when I'm talking 7 feet of storm surge, you can see it right here. That's about a foot above my head. Just really important to think of it that way. Rain, inland rain, not just along the coast, but inland rain, 4 to 6 inches in some areas. Some places could get 12 inches of rain from what's left of Ian as we move inland. So that's huge. Charleston, Charlotte, Wilmington, Roanoke, Hatteras, any one of these areas could see significant rain. There's terrain here too. So it's not just ponding water. There's terrain in the Appalachians, the mountains. You can get flash flooding. So even well inland in some of these mountain communities, you can see that fast-flowing water, and it could be incredibly, incredibly dangerous. So, and the last reminder, those are the direct impacts. Just a strong reminder, the biggest reminder I could give here, it's just dangerous after the storm too. All right. So for communities watching, you got to be careful getting outside. There's power lines down. There's debris. Just so dangerous to be on the roads. Don't drive your car where water covers the road. Half of those fatalities inland from the flooding, half of those come from driving automobiles into the water. Half of them come from cars. So you got to stay out of the water. And the last one is, generators have become readily available in these communities. I just can't urge this strong enough. Be careful with the generators. When the power's out, know how to use a generator, right? Don't keep them in the house. Don't put a generator in the house. Don't put it by an open window. Don't put it in your garage. It's got to be well away from your house. It's just a dangerous situation. And a lot of these hurricanes have seen more fatalities after the fact, especially with the generators, than we do from the direct fatalities. So it's something to remember as we go through this storm. So I appreciate everybody being here. That's the latest update on the hurricane.
Thank you, Ken, for that important update on the weather and also those critical safety tips. As we've just heard, Hurricane Ian still presents an extreme threat to everyone in its path. We're already seeing the impacts of the storm in South Carolina as I speak, and in Georgia as well. Now is the time for the residents impacted to execute their hurricane plans and closely monitor local media for forecast updates and also follow the directions made by local officials. That advice we get from the National Weather Service and the Hurricane Center is what drives those local official alerts. Please follow them. They will keep you safe. All the hazards that we've seen in Florida can impact those further up the coast, just as Ken mentioned. Strong wind, storm surge, flash flooding. Fortunately, the President approved Governor McMaster's request for an emergency declaration for South Carolina last night. This declaration authorizes FEMA to provide emergency protective measures, including direct federal assistance. We urge the residents of South Carolina and everyone in the path of the storm to remain vigilant. For Florida, as we continue to monitor the situation in South Carolina and the overall path of the storm, state and federal search and rescue operations remain underway in Florida. FEMA's urban search and rescue teams are part of a unified effort to conduct operations by air, land, and sea in coordination with our federal partners, as well as state and local officials. As part of this effort, Florida has activated about 5,000 Florida National Guard members, as well as another 2,000 members from other states through mutual aid to help with search and rescue operations and other emergency protective measures. I'll let our Coast Guard colleagues provide an update on their search and rescue efforts as part of this unified command in a later brief. Homeland Security Secretary Mayorkas also activated the DHS Search Capacity Force yesterday. This is comprised of 7,500 members from other federal agencies who can augment our staffing patterns to help us address the response and recovery needs following storms. This will significantly enhance our efforts in Florida as well as up the eastern seaboard as the storm continues to move. Nearly 3,000 federal responders are working in Florida and across the southeast right now, including more than 1,600 FEMA staff that are deployed to support this mission in Florida. I'm immensely grateful to the more than 850 emergency management personnel from other states that have answered the call to help serve storm survivors and communities that need their help through mutual aid. Finally, I'd like to add that our Center for Faith-Based and Neighborhood Partnerships is coordinating closely with national non-governmental organizations such as the National Urban League, AARP, the Methodist Episcopal Church, and national voluntary organizations active in disasters to ensure FEMA and our federal partners have the best on-the-ground information from communities impacted. Thanks to President Biden's swift approval of Florida's major disaster declaration, FEMA assistance is now available to help impacted individuals across designated counties to help jumpstart their recovery. The declaration also enables us to deliver assistance adequate and tailored to meet the needs of our survivors. Today, I'm happy to share that 4 additional counties have been added to the major disaster declaration for assistance, and as we continue to survey damage, we expect that number to grow. I want to once again urge impacted individuals to register for assistance in those declared counties. You can do this by visiting disasterassistance.gov, using the FEMA app, or dialing 1-800-621-FEMA. That's 1-800-621-3362 to start your registration process to get the assistance and the services that you need. In addition to all 67 counties and the Miccosukee Tribe, Indians of Florida, and the Seminole Tribe of Florida, they're all eligible for emergency protective measures as well, including search and rescue efforts. Before I turn it over to my partners on the stage, I want to remind everyone that this storm is not over yet, as Ken Graham has said. And just because the skies are clear does not mean it's safe. Water can be electrified. There can be other hazards in there. Please stay safe and continue to listen to local officials. Whether it's South Carolina, Florida, Georgia, Puerto Rico, Alaska, we'll be there to support those impacted by disasters. We have the resources, we have the resolve, and we remain ready to lean forward to continue to help those in Florida and elsewhere to jumpstart the recovery. Thank you, and with that, I'll turn it over to Daniel Yargas, who will provide our Spanish language update. Daniel?
Thank you so much. Buenas tardes, soy Daniel Yargués. Empezamos con la actualización. La administradora de FEMA, Diane Criswell, visitó el estado de Florida y se reunió con el gobernador del estado y va a también evaluar los daños. Como lo escuchamos del director de NOAA, Ken Graham, Ian todavía presenta una amenaza a las personas en su trayectoria. Estamos viendo los impactos de la tormenta en estos momentos. Ahora es el momento de que los residentes de Carolina del Sur ejecuten esos planes de emergencia que tienen. Todos los peligros que hemos visto en el estado de Florida pueden afectar a aquellos que viven tierra adentro, con fuertes vientos, lluvia, inundaciones y muy peligrosa la marejada ciclónica que puede ser mortal también. Afortunadamente, el presidente Biden aprobó una petición del gobernador McMaster de Carolina del Sur de una declaración de emergencia. Urgimos a los residentes de Carolina del Sur y a todos los que están en la trayectoria de esta tormenta a estar muy atentos a sus desarrollos. Así como continuamos vigilando la situación en Carolina del Sur, la trayectoria del huracán Ian, las operaciones de búsqueda y rescate federales y estatales continúan llevándose a cabo. Tenemos equipos de búsqueda y rescate urbanos, son parte del esfuerzo unificado para llevar a cabo operaciones por aire, tierra y agua, en coordinación con nuestros socios federales, incluyendo a la Guardia Costera de los Estados Unidos, el Departamento de Defensa, el Departamento del Interior y autoridades estatales de Florida y locales también. Y como parte de este esfuerzo, Florida ha activado alrededor de 5,000 miembros de la Guardia Nacional y a 2,000 miembros de otros estados para asistir a la respuesta, incluyendo equipos también de búsqueda y rescate. Nuestros socios de la Guardia Costera proveerán más detalles de sus operaciones en unos momentos. El secretario del Departamento de Seguridad Nacional de los Estados Unidos, Alejandro Mayorkas, ha activado la fuerza laboral adicional con 7,500 miembros de otras agencias federales que están ayudando a suplementar nuestra fuerza laboral en FEMA. Esto aumentará de manera significativa nuestros esfuerzos en el estado de Florida. Casi 3,000 empleados de rescate federal trabajan en Florida y en el sureste del país, incluyendo más de 1,600 empleados de FEMA que están apoyando esta misión. Como lo dijo la asistente Bink, estamos muy agradecidos por el trabajo de más de 850 empleados de manejo de emergencias y otros estados que han apoyado a las personas, a los residentes de Florida, por medio del acuerdo mutuo que tienen de trabajo. El Centro de Municipalidades y Trabajos de Culto está coordinando muy de cerca con organizaciones no gubernamentales como National Urban League, AARP, la Iglesia Metodista Episcopal Africana y otras organizaciones voluntarias activas en desastres para asegurarse de que FEMA, sus socios federales, tengan la mejor información disponible para las comunidades afectadas. Y como lo dijo Ann, le damos gracias a la rápida aprobación de la declaración de desastre mayor por parte del presidente Biden para el estado de Florida. FEMA estamos disponibles para ayudar a las personas afectadas en los condados designados a su recuperación. Esta declaración también nos permite ofrecer asistencia adecuada y adapta a las necesidades de cada comunidad. Hoy me complace compartir que han añadido 4 condados adicionales al estado de Florida a causa del huracán Ian para recibir asistencia y las evaluaciones de daños van a continuar llevándose a cabo en estos días. También queremos pedirle a todas las personas que fueron afectadas por el desastre que soliciten asistencia en disasterassistance.gov/ES, llamando al 1-800-621-3362 o descargando la aplicación de FEMA. Y además de los 67 condados, también las tribus Miskosuki y la tribu Seminole de Florida también pueden agregarse a esta declaración con protecciones de emergencias. Antes de ceder la palabra a nuestros socios, quiero recordarles que esta tormenta no ha terminado. Aunque vean que ya salió el sol y que hay cielos despejados, el peligro de esta tormenta, de este huracán, continúa. Y podemos darles ejemplos como el tendido de cables caídos, aguas inundadas que pueden ser mortales, y también les pedimos que no salga y que permita que las cuadrillas de trabajo realicen ese trabajo para la recuperación. Ya sea en Florida, Carolina del Sur, Puerto Rico, en Alaska, FEMA estará presente para apoyar los impactos de los desastres. Tenemos los recursos y la determinación para hacerlo. Gracias.
Good afternoon. Coast Guard responders continue round-the-clock operations with a primary purpose of saving lives. At heart, we're a humanitarian organization, and that's what we're doing on the ground in Florida as we speak. We're doing this from the air, on the ground, and also from the sea. And since the storm made landfall yesterday, we've saved 117 lives, together with pets of the members that we've saved. Those operations are going to continue for as long as it takes to rescue everyone. This operation is happening with unity of effort and tight synchronization and organization with all the requisite federal, state, and local authorities. For example, the National Guard, FEMA, and then local responders that are responding in the air and on the ground. We've all seen the images that have come from the devastated areas. We've all heard the stories coming out of that. And Coast Guard men and women who are operating in Florida are doing so with great sympathy and great fellowship with those who have lost their businesses, may have lost their homes, and even may have lost loved ones. The Coast Guard also has a top priority to reestablish and reconstitute the maritime transportation system. So in the days leading up to storm landfall, the Coast Guard, together with port authorities and the private sector, secured all the ports on the west coast of Florida and then the northeast portion of Florida to be secure as the storm passed through. Now that the storm has passed, we're working as we speak with the Army Corps of Engineers and NOAA to do a rapid survey and assessment of those port areas so we can resume and reconstitute maritime transportation that's so incredibly crucial to trade and making sure that supplies make it into Florida. So we're focusing primarily on the Port of Tampa, St. Pete, and the Port of Manatee in Florida. So as you've heard, this isn't over yet, and this continues to be a very dangerous storm as it makes landfall in South Carolina with impacts in North Carolina, Georgia, and inland. Just as the Coast Guard did to prepare for landfall in Florida, we've worked the past couple of days leading up to storm landfall in those new areas to make sure that ports were secured and that Coast Guard aircraft, boats, and cutters moved out of harm's way, and that we staged ready to respond once the storm passed and it was safe to do so. And so we're poised again to do search and rescue operations together with federal, state, and local partners in those areas as necessary once we can do a rapid assessment. It goes without saying, but it bears repeating, that we encourage everyone in these newly impacted areas to heed the advice of their emergency response authorities for evacuation, safe haven, and for preparedness, so they can help manage their own safety and save their own lives in advance of this storm as it moves through. Thank you very much, and looking forward to your questions.
Ms. O'Connell, Health and Human Services, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you so much. I'm Dawn O'Connell, the Assistant Secretary for Preparedness and Response at HHS. And as part of this whole of government response that you're seeing up here, HHS's Administration for Strategic Preparedness and Response, or ASPR, which I lead, has deployed teams of medical responders and supplies to the region in support of our state and local partners. By the end of today, we will have more than 318 personnel deployed and available to respond in coordination with FEMA and the impacted states. This includes personnel from the National Disaster Medical System, or NDMS, along with regional emergency coordinators, incident management teams, and logistical staff. Our teams are deployed in Georgia and in Miami, allowing us to be positioned to support any emerging medical needs in Florida and along the East Coast as Ian makes its second landfall in South Carolina. These NDMS teams include physicians, nurses, paramedics, and pharmacists who can assist hospitals with the triage and treatment of patients. They can provide medical support for people found by urban search and rescue. They provide medical and public health support to those relocated to emergency shelters, including to shelters serving special needs populations, and they can provide pharmaceutical support and resupply for ambulance strike teams. These teams are coming equipped with 52 tractor trailers holding approximately 520,000 pounds of medical supplies and equipment that can head right into the areas with the most need so they don't have to worry about securing equipment or supplies on their way in. Beginning tomorrow, one of these teams will deploy to Sarasota Memorial Hospital in Venice, Florida, to provide hospital decompression support. And on September 26, Secretary Becerra declared a public health emergency for Florida in response to the hurricane. We also activated HHS Empower program, which is a partnership between ASPR and the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services to identify Medicare beneficiaries who rely on electricity-dependent durable medical equipment and certain healthcare services such as dialysis, oxygen tanks, or home health to help anticipate, plan for, and respond to the needs of these at-risk citizens in the impacted areas. We continue to work in close collaboration with FEMA and our other partners, and we are committed to helping respond to the health-related impacts of the storm. We will provide all the support we can to help these communities in need. So if you are a hospital or a healthcare system, long-term care facility, assisted living facility, and you need help, please let us know. We've got teams on the ground ready to assist. Thanks so much.
Thank you, ma'am. Major General?
Thank you.
Corps of Engineers.
Good afternoon. I'm Major General Butch Graham from the United States Army Corps of Engineers. The Army Corps is well postured to support FEMA both in Puerto Rico, Florida, and South Carolina. We are certainly standing ready to provide public works and engineering support and also to coordinate long-term infrastructure recovery. Simply put, we are leaning forward. USACE has more than 50 specially trained response teams supported by pre-awarded emergency contracts that allow us to perform that wide range of public works and engineering related support. In Florida right now we have 600 professionals, that's Corps of Engineers, civilians, our military, and our contracting partners moving generators forward to assist the state of Florida to provide emergency power. We're assisting the state of Florida to provide assessment of the infrastructure. Many of you have seen the pictures on media that shows what's been damaged. We're providing backstop support. Currently, we're working on 9 hospitals, as well as helping Lee County determine where its water distribution system is currently leaking. And then finally, we've got great partnerships with our tribal partners down in Florida. We've been asked by the Miccosukee tribe to assist them on a canal that's currently flooding, and we've got engineers on site and pumps leading or moving to that location. Ma'am, thank you for your time here today.
All right, thank you. With that, we'll take questions.
Hi there, I'm Nicole Stang with CBS News. Thank you so much for conducting this briefing. If you'll indulge me, I have a question for you, Assistant Administrator and Vice Admiral Codier and Director Ken Graham. Assistant Administrator, state emergency officials have announced 21 deaths as of this morning. Are there any updates to that number or indications that fatalities will increase significantly in the coming days, as well as a sense of how many remain missing? And separately, can you speak to some of your bigger concerns moving forward, as well as efforts to counter any fraud, scammers who want to take advantage of urgent providers?
Absolutely. To the first question, the state is the source of that information, so that is the latest information at this time. As we've discussed, we are laser focused on life safety efforts as we continue our search and rescue operations in conjunction with the Coast Guard and others. And as it relates to fraud, we do have controls in place that can continue to screen for signs of it while not slowing down assistance to those who need it.
And Vice Admiral Codier, can you speak to some of the challenges of conducting rescue missions given the level of decimation and in some cases, water that has risen beyond the roof of a home? And right now District 7 is handling recovery efforts in Puerto Rico, rescue efforts in Florida, and preparations in South Carolina. How has the Coast Guard adjusted to meet this sort of incredible?
Yeah, well, thanks. Land-based urban search and rescue does present quite a challenge. You'll have down power lines, the infrastructure is damaged, people might be trapped in homes. And so the first thing that we do is just make sure that we've got really tight coordination with all of the responders that are working. So in any given area, you might have Coast Guard operating together with National Guard forces from Florida and also mobilized from outside of the area. And then you'll have local responders that could be working on the ground. The Coast Guard actually mobilized a fleet of shallow water boats that we have that can operate in waters that in flooded areas and streets and things like that. We're operating there, and so for example, there's a team from Miami-Dade County that's mobilized from outside of the area that the Coast Guard is coordinating in. And then what you have, in a normal circumstance, you'll have a 911 system that is fully functioning, and we encourage people to continue to use the 911 system as their primary means for asking for help. But also in that type of search and rescue, we will go block by block as a response group to make sure that we've identified everyone. Some of these folks may not have the means of communication, knocking on doors, doing overflights to see if individuals might be on rooftops or stranded in flooded streets.
And if I can just ask Director Graham, can you talk a little bit about your concerns as the storm travels up the East Coast? Can you speak to what happens as the storm passes through South Carolina and beyond this weekend? What would you tell people maybe in North Carolina or Virginia who might be going about their business this weekend?
Yeah, a couple things. Those on the coast, you just got to look at that storm surge. I mean, 5 to 7 feet of storm surge is life-threatening in some of those cases. So just really be aware of that water. The other message I have is, you look at the rainfall. These tropical systems, you can't just think it's some coastal problem. That rain and that moisture has to go somewhere. So as a result, you're going to get heavy rainfall. Those rainfall totals, you start getting 5 to 7 inches, maybe even up to a foot of rain in some of those mountainous areas. You could be well inland. I'm talking hundreds of miles inland and still get those heavy rainfall amounts. I'm very concerned about some of those tropical rains getting into the terrain areas. So that's where you're thinking about fast-flowing water, quickly rising water, get that flash flooding. It just becomes incredibly dangerous, and especially if you think about we're making landfall now, right? So a lot of that rain's going to occur tonight, and that's in the dark. So nighttime rainfall, nighttime flash flooding is incredibly dangerous. So just urging everyone to listen to those local officials. If you don't have to go anywhere, please don't, because it's incredibly dangerous. Yep.
Anyone else? Questions?
All right. Thank you guys for your time.
Thank you.
That'll conclude today's conference. Thank you, ma'am. Well, appreciate everyone's time again today. Please stay in contact with the FEMA news desk. You have the address. All right. Thank you, guys. Thanks, Nicole. Yeah. Thank you.